As most of you know, I went to playtest Necromancy, the Jagex HQ in May, and recently I got the opportunity to playtest Necromancy in what is, essentially, its final form. In this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the changes the developers have made since, so whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The main part of Necromancy that needed more attention and changes that I noticed was the tutorial during my first playtest in May. And I wasn't the only creator invited that noticed the tutorial was in need of some improving. Previously, the tutorial didn't really hold your hand enough and wasn't visually appealing. Now you have these slick looking pop-ups that highlight key information and are presented in an easy to understand way. The old tutorial also caused some confusion if you were to spacebar through it. Now you might be saying, well, then just don't spacebar. Well, let's be honest here, a lot of high-level players are going to try to spacebar through this tutorial to get into the action as fast as possible. And chances are new players are going to try to rush through it as well because they're curious to see what Necromancy is about. Short attention spans are a real thing, and having pop-ups with keywords highlighted is going to make it so much easier to understand the skill, even if you were to spacebar or speed through the tutorial. Another weird thing in the previous older tutorials is that the trolls you kill as part of a combat example were one-hits. Like, huh? They might have been a placeholder for all I know, but you now actually have to physically kill something and you can see your abilities gaining adrenaline, so you get a better understanding of what's going on instead of just bloop, threat's gone. Bada beam bada boom, you're done. The tutorial is more like what I would have imagined a proper tutorial for this skill to be. Much like the archaeology tutorial, you now have pop-ups, trails, and even little cutscene-like things showing you where certain NPCs are. Oh, and the best thing is that those interfaces don't stop guiding you until maybe like level 20? Like if you unlock certain low-level abilities, it will still tell you what's going on. Very nice. Oh, and you know how new combat updates, primarily Slayer ones in the cave, like Abyssal Lords and Armored Phantoms, are always packed on release, causing you not to be able to find a world unless you start hopping for like 10 minutes, and then you get crashed 10 minutes afterwards? Well, Jagex has anticipated players annihilating creatures across Gielinor and added a low-level troll cave featuring ghost trolls inside the city of which is instanced to, I believe, 3 players at max. So for the lower levels, you'll always be able to find a spot that isn't completely crowded to garbage. Oh, and it's absolutely stunning as well. Just look how pretty this area looks. Very much screenshot worthy. In terms of changes to rituals, I don't think all that much has changed. In general, the system seemed fine, although it is a shame to see that they have not improved the visibility of disturbance events, or at least, more specifically, the moth that spawns, because it's still very hard to spot and click on. Like if you aren't actively looking for it, you would probably miss it. It would definitely be better if these moths had a sort of black, smokish particle trail behind them. Combat-wise, a lot has changed. Abilities have different level requirements as to ease players into Necromancy more, making it more beginner-friendly. Damage values have been adjusted. Just really a lot has changed. A couple of noteworthy changes is that the soul abilities, so another form of spender abilities, basically your second adrenaline bar except it's 1, 2, or 3 souls, has been moved to the higher levels. You don't come into contact with these until level 50 for Necromancy and above, which makes it easier to ease into Necromancy, at least in my opinion. One of the biggest and, in my opinion, most important changes to Necromancy is that conjures, so your summons, last way longer. Previously, juggling your conjures, abilities, soul abilities, necrotic stacks, your other weapon switches, vuln bombs, paying attention to the boss, all that kind of stuff was incredibly chaotic and complex, and it felt like you would have to, all the time, be aware of your conjures to keep them alive, which was a fun game mechanic. I mean, it is Necromancy after all, but because the timer of these conjures was so short, the room for error was like minuscule, like really small. And because in that build, the conjures were the majority of your damage, it felt like you had to focus on them. In my feedback document, I compared it to pretty much like top tier PVM, trying to get the most out of your damage in terms of difficulty, but then again, I did skip to 120 Necromancy, so if you were to actually level the skill and learn as you go along, I would assume you would have better control over your abilities. But going back to the conjures, they seem to last about 50% longer now, with the exception of the ghost. There are still passive upgrades that can increase that time even more, and the life transfer ability now extends the duration of your spirits by like 25% more as well, which is good. Conjures lasting longer reduces some complexity, which there will still be plenty of with the regular Necro abilities, and the mods are going to continue to evolve the skill after its release, so I wouldn't be too worried about there not being a high enough skill ceiling if you're a very good skilled PVMer. Regarding to damage, I'm not sure how much the damage of these conjures has changed, but I do believe they no longer proc poison, so that would be a damage nerf in itself. Now, something else I found incredibly frustrating during my first playtest is that there was no stop or attack option for your conjures. So if you're doing a boss with reflect mechanics like a Raxer with the web mechanic, you would get absolutely splattered even at low rages because your conjures would continue dealing spirit damage and Mr. Raxy boy would keep hitting you back. You don't have a stop button, but they've changed it to a point where you don't get reflected damage from your spirit damage, so your conjures hits. Unfortunately, I spent too little time to get any real feel or footage of high-level maxed out Necromancy combat, as I was focusing on the early game mostly. Oh, and maxing out my character with cheat commands took a lot longer than expected. But even in that short bit of time, I could see and feel that Necromancy was getting ready for release. The abilities feel and look so much more powerful than the unfinished ones I tried before. The meat is on the bones now, if you will. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one on release. Oh, and before I vanish, here's what the updated Magic Kiln Cape will look like. Easily one of my favorite capes. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.